Your Royal Highness, the last time we spoke at the Munich leaders meeting in Al Ula, Saudi Arabia, it was just a few days before a ceasefire was declared in Gaza. We didn't know if we would get there. We have gotten there, but as yet, not much momentum in figuring out what comes next. Are you satisfied with where we are today in Gaza in terms of that ceasefire, and what are you hoping for?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Milken and his group for inviting me again. And it's nice to be back in the UAE, as always. I cannot help but be hopeful. Although, as you say, things are a bit slow, there is still bloodshed, and the prospects for further progress doubtful, but I think there is a worldwide resolution to go forward and to get to the end of the Trump initiative. You know, it's composed of 20 points. In a recent talk that I gave, I addressed Mr. Trump by asking him to go to number 21, which is recognizing a Palestinian state for himself and for the United States. We're not there yet. And I'm not sure that at the end of the 20 points that there will be that further 21st point to go forward. But who knows? Stranger things have happened in the past.
Earlier today, we had a conversation with the GCC Secretary General about the safety of this part of the world, of the GCC specifically. We're not just talking about oil and gas infrastructure anymore. We're talking about major infrastructure hub, transportation hub. When we talk about the Red Sea or the Strait of Hormuz, the Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, we're talking about areas of major global commerce. How would you rate the safety and security of the Gulf Arab states today?
Well, you know, remarkably, in the last few years particularly, in spite of what has been going around, whether in Palestine or in Sudan or Yemen or other places, the GCC have prospered and have maintained a safety record, I think, which is exemplary, not only for infrastructure, but also for the lives and livelihoods of the people who live here and the people who work here. And that's why, as I see many of the surveys of who or where do you want to go work for people from outside the GCC, there is a tremendous influx of people who want to come and work in the GCC. So that is the best sign that people feel safe here.
Mm-hmm. Tell me this, and this is obviously part of a larger conversation when we talk about U.S. influence in this part of the world, beyond security. In your mind, are we going to see GCC countries really beginning to secure themselves in a way perhaps we haven't seen in the past?
I believe there is such progress happening among the GCC countries, especially as a result of what has been happening. You know, the attack on Qatar by Israel, I think, was not just shocking, but also would probably taken as a warning sign that we need to get our act together as GCC countries to defend ourselves. It's not unusual for us in the GCC to work with friends from outside the GCC, especially on matters of defense. Example of the war to liberate Kuwait, for example, where it was a worldwide effort that brought an end to the Saddam's occupation of Kuwait. And going back a few years to 2019, when the kingdom itself was subjected to an attack by Iran against oil installations, again, that was also another sign that we have to work to to be able to defend ourselves. But we also need to bring others with us. Hence, you saw Mr. Trump declaring Qatar, for example, as a country of I can't remember the terminology, but
strategic and security importance.
right. But also the UAE also is enjoying similar status with the United States, but also the recent agreement between Crown Prince Mohammed and President Trump on Saudi Arabia's position as a non-NATO ally was also a sign that we want to work with others so that the defense of the area becomes more than just the GCC.
Yeah. And to that point, several years ago when Mohammed bin Salman did his first interview with a U.S. news network that was on CBS, the conversation revolved around whether or not Saudi Arabia would ever consider obtaining a nuclear weapon. In your mind, given the fact that the Gulf countries clearly are upping their own security, do you foresee Saudi Arabia ever obtaining nuclear weapons?
In the past, I've said that that is an option that the kingdom must explore seriously. And we heard words from the Crown Prince several years ago that if Iran acquired a nuclear weapon, that the kingdom would also seek to do that. The way that things have developed in the past year or so with the bombing of Iranian installations, nuclear installations, that may have delayed, if you like, Iran's capabilities to acquire nuclear weapons. My personal view is that the issue of nuclear weapons should be comprehensive. It should not be selective. And we already have a nuclear-armed country in our part of the world, which is Israel. Nobody talks about Israel. And so that is something also that should keep us alert and vigilant in trying to achieve what I think would be the best solution for the nuclear issue, which is a zone free of weapons of mass destruction. And in the United Nations...
so no nuclear weapons, Israel included?
For everybody. And not just nuclear weapons, but weapons of mass destruction in general. And that is something I think that would really put to rest how we enrich uranium, how the nuclear industry can be developed peacefully, and commitments from the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to protect the members of this zone should they come to an agreement.
His Royal Highness had worn many hats throughout his career as ambassador to the United States, the United Kingdom, but also as head of Saudi's internal intelligence services. Your Royal Highness, when you look at what is happening in the region today, who is the greatest threat to regional stability? Is it Iran or is it Israel?
Well, I think for the moment, definitely it is Israel. We've seen that Iran has been dealt a strong hand by the United States, and events in Lebanon with the diminishing of Hezbollah, the change of regime in Syria have obviously affected Iran's ability to affect and to influence events in the broader Middle East. Israel, I think, is feeling its oats, if I can say that, by bombing Syria almost on a daily basis, continuing to bomb Palestinians, whether in Gaza or the West Bank, and also in Lebanon, where there's supposed to be a ceasefire. So that is definitely not a harbinger of peace in our part of the world. So in my view, it is Israel now that is the troublemaker and should be reined in, not just by the United States, but also by the world community.
Tell me this, when you look at what's happened in Syria over the last year, you mentioned Israel's actions there. In your mind, are we ever going to see Israel and Syria in a peace deal?
I saw an interview of Professor Mersheimer, famous for his positions on international relations, but nowadays especially about Israel. And he expressed the view that since the time of the establishment of Israel, back in 1948, that successive Israeli prime ministers have sometimes expressed publicly their view that the countries around them, around Israel, should be weak so that they don't affect the security of Israel.
It's certainly the case with Lebanon.
And not just Lebanon, but it is happening in Syria. And the way that the Netanyahu government is dealing with Syria is definitely trying to keep it weak and trying to perhaps even work to divide Syria into subdivisions. Who knows where that will end? So it is from that perspective, I think, where I mentioned that the world should come together and rein in the ability of Israel to use its military might for that purpose.
Walk me through how you read Turkey today. Because over the last 20 years of covering the region, I've watched gunboats go up and down the Bosphorus, planes shot down, and an aggressive, president in Recep Erdogan. In your mind, Turkey's stance today, are they dangerous?
I'm seeing Turkey actually as being very positive in the last couple of years or so, maybe even longer.
Why?
Well, I think for their own interest. And they've recognized that the positions they took previously, particularly in, if you like, not just opposing, but trying to show a position of leadership in our part of the world, disregarding the interests of other countries like Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries, did not get them anywhere. Now, I think the fact that they are working with the GCC countries, and particularly with Saudi Arabia, they're becoming very constructive. And Turkey has a big role to play in our part of the world. Let's not forget, 600 years of Ottoman rule in our part of the world should have some impact on the rest of us, and hopefully constructively, not negatively. And I think President Erdogan has come around to that view rather than trying to one-upmanship policy in our part of the world.
So a recalibration by the Turks?
I think so, and I think it's working.
Tell me this, U.S. influence in the region, it's a conversation that you and I have had many times.
Yes.
How do you see the United States today?
Well, it's difficult to see a cheerful view of the United States because of the divisions within the United States. And it's not just right and left. I think it goes deeper than that. It is unfortunate. I spent most of my youth in the United States as a student, and then as a director of intelligence, I worked with America for many years, and then as ambassador for a short time. America today is waging an internal struggle, along with what it does abroad. And that is not for the betterment of peace in any part of the world, because of America's unique position as truly the strongest country, not just militarily, but in terms of economy, in terms of entertainment. And wherever you go, the entertainment business is ruled by the United States. In terms of literature, surveys that I've seen show that the number of books published in the United States far exceeds anything anywhere else. And so it is culture, it is economy, it is military strength. They're all part of the United States. And we benefit from those activities in those aspects of American society. But yet, those of us who enjoy and respect the American people wish that they would be more aligned together than they are now.
In order to project strength?
Well, in order to project peace. I think America in the past has played an important role in bringing peace, not mentioning the historic intervention of America in the liberation of Kuwait. If it wasn't for the United States, Saddam maybe would still be ruling Kuwait and maybe expanding into Saudi Arabia and other parts. So for that purpose, America can be a peaceful and a peacemaking partner and reliably so. The fact that they're engaged in this internal struggle for themselves and still trying to find an American identity is very disturbing.
Yeah. Tell me this, when you look at what's happening in Europe today, whether it be in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, elsewhere, the immigration debate is top of the headlines. Many say that this is causing far-right movements to gain momentum. How worried are you about the immigration issues in Europe?
It's difficult for someone like me to look from the outside and try to put my place in the place of an average citizen in Europe, in any of the European countries, and see what is happening there, what is on issue of immigration, whether it is on issues of available resources. Many of these European countries are taxing their people to the hilt, and instead of giving to the people, they're actually taking from them. It's true that they provide services in return, but if you look at the media in Europe and in the United Kingdom, their input into servicing and serving their people is much criticized by their own media as being lacking in efficiency, lacking in effectiveness, and perhaps even afflicted with corruption, whether bureaucratic or commercial or financial. So it's not a happy state in Europe. And it's not just immigration. But also, I think it is a question of identity. And like what is happening in America, trying to find an identity for themselves, well, good luck. And they know that they have a history, not just in Europe, but in the rest of us, through their colonial enterprises in the rest of the world, but also working with other people and so on. And I just hope that that affliction that they have with themselves will not prevent them from being positive actors. One example of that, of course, is the work that France did with Saudi Arabia in getting recognition for the Palestinian state. It showed a very effective capability that a European country can lead. And also Norway, let us not forget the role of Norway from the 90s when they put together the Oslo Accords and subsequently working with France and Saudi Arabia on getting a Palestinian state recognized. So there are things that Europe can do. But again, the internal struggles that they have, whether it is over immigration, whether it is over social services, whether over issues of cultural identity even, puts them back a little bit, and they're more on the back foot than going forward.
Does it worry you that Muslims will be unfairly targeted?
It's not just Muslims who are targeted. And we've seen surveys throughout Europe. Jews are being targeted in Europe. If one can imagine, after the Second World War and the issue of the Holocaust, and then see a resurgence now of so-called anti-Semitism, although I think that is a misnomer because it's only exclusive to the Jews. But it is something unthinkable to be happening, having gone through the experience of the Second World War. But Muslims as well, as you said, I think also there are ethnic issues involved here, not just religious issues, whether it is African or East European or Asian or whatever. There are double standards when it comes to dealing with issues. We've seen that very visibly over the Ukraine issue, when the Ukrainian people poured into the rest of Europe after the Russian invasion, how they were treated and how others who are not from European stock, if you like, were not equally treated like them. So those are issues that have to be faced and resolved by the Europeans.
Tell me this, you've watched these movements like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Daesh, and other militant groups grow and fade. In your mind, is the region still vulnerable to that kind of ideology today? Or have we moved or turned a corner?
My view is that the issues of terrorism and us and them will always be with us and have been with us historically, and not confined to one area geographically or one aberration of religious interpretation or any other distinctions that might arise. But nonetheless, recently, I think the fact that the issue of Palestine has been so dramatically and I would say tragically left to become what it has with the Israeli destruction of Gaza and the killing of so many Palestinians in that time. These are the seeds for more of those extremist and nihilistic developments that brought about Al-Qaeda and the so-called Islamic State and other offshoots, the lone wolf operators, etc. And it is only by resolving those political tragedies like Palestine that you can meet the challenge and face down the appeal of these ideas and nihilism that rises up from the effects of those tragedies.
You've seen this over decades. In your mind, is Western society, Gulf society, global society prepared for the next wave of terrorism?
I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to answer that question. But let me say that there are mechanisms that are in place and have been worked at for many years. For example, the Center for Counterterrorism at the United Nations. If you remember, that idea was put forward by Saudi Arabia back in, I think it was 2005, by the late King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. It only came about after persistent follow-through, not just with the kingdom, but other countries as well, in 2015. So it took 10 years to bring about the establishment of a mechanism where intelligence sharing and training for counterterrorism and so on can be available, especially to countries that don't have the necessary means, either human or technical or mechanical, to meet those challenges. Nowadays, in the kingdom, for example, there was the establishment of the Islamic Counterterrorism Association, I think it is called, which brought together more than 42 Muslim countries to look at the issue of terrorism and share know-how and skills in meeting that challenge. So from that perspective, I think on those two organizations can do much, but similar things should be available to Latin America, to Africa, to parts of Asia, that people who can share together with their neighbors and their fellow human beings the means to address the issue of extremism, whether it is coming from religious thought or from ethnic divisions or from any other sources, economic scarcity, etc.
Before I let you go, one of the sort of tragic instances of decisive action is the fact that the Taliban ruling Afghanistan today, it's one of the least corrupt countries in the world. It's safer, if you look at just the amount of terror attacks in that country, than it has been in decades, as is Pakistan, its neighbor. In your mind, how do you square that when you have an extremist government that arguably is creating a situation where, at least in one part of our region, it's safer than it's ever been?
It's another tragedy. And the people who are paying the price, basically, are the Afghan people because of the misconduct and the misrule of the people who are in charge now within the Taliban. And I am not privy to official engagement with what is happening in Afghanistan, but I see what is written in the press and hear what is said by statespeople and officials about what's happening in Afghanistan. It's a continuing tragedy. I worked with many Afghans during my lifetime, and they have amazing characters of dignity and worth and generosity and so on. But they also have those who are not like that, who are prone to violence and things like that, whether it is tribal or it is sectarian or any other subdivision thereof. And the fact that, as you said, the Taliban are continuing to afflict the Afghan people with their misrule is a terrible development that should be handled worldwide. The fact that the countries in the world are not willing to give them the political and diplomatic recognition that they are seeking is a sign that people recognize what is happening in Afghanistan is unacceptable. Mm. But in the end, it is the average Afghani that pays the price. The only way that the kingdom, for example, is dealing with that is to try to give through non-governmental organizations and worldwide organizations through the United Nations and so on, humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. But it's an ongoing tragedy, and it's very, very heartbreaking.
Do you see it as like a bad penny, a problem that could resurface?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's terrible.
Your Royal Highness, we have to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.